Bill O'Brien out after only 4 games as the head coach and general manager of the Texans. And literally, he had only 4 games as officially the GM of the team. And now he's gone.
And I think we both had the same reaction, Mike. Holy crap. I mean, it was stunning and not stunning at the same time. I mean, it's a guy that went 52-48. He was planning to take over the play calling duties again next week, and that's obviously not going to happen. It might have been a little more fun if he'd either been fired as GM or fired as head coach, but he was obviously fired as both. And Romeo Crennel is now going to step in, to a former head coach, and be the head coach the rest of the season. But this is a bad ball club. And it's not going to get any better for them. They just don't have a whole lot of talent outside of the obvious guys, the quarterback and J.J. Watt, and there's just not a lot to build around. I think he failed as GM as much as he failed as coach.
Well, I agree. And look, I have said multiple times in recent days that every coach needs another voice, a persuasive voice, an influential voice. Not Jack Easterby. Nothing against Jack Easterby. He's not the voice that is in place to say to Bill O'Brien, maybe you should just try to work out your issues with DeAndre Hopkins instead of trading him. Maybe you should press pause on that. I mean, we've seen some impulsive moves by Bill O'Brien that would be no different than the impulsive moves other coaches would make if there's no one in the building to say, timeout. We have unlimited timeouts in this facility. We don't have to hold them. We don't have to use them strategically. Anytime we want to press pause, we can. Let's take a break. Let's make sure this is what we should be doing. Look at how quickly and this was when they didn't have a GM, but Bill O'Brien was essentially the GM. Labor Day weekend of 2019, boom, big trade for Laramie Tunsil. 2 first-round draft picks without signing into a long-term contract. Strike one. The Jadeveon Clowney thing where they end up paying $7 million of his salary to get him off the roster and to get not a whole lot in return for him from the Seahawks. I mean, there have been signs that this wasn't working, but the validation came after the 2019 season. They won the division. They won a playoff game. They were leading the Kansas City Chiefs 24-0 in the divisional round of the playoffs. And then they get the schedule from hell to start the year at the Chiefs, the Ravens, at the Steelers. What the hell, Cal McNair, did you expect from Bill O'Brien the first 3 weeks of the season? The only thing you can fault the team for is coming home and assuming that the 0-3 Vikings were more of a cupcake than they were. They shouldn't have assumed they were getting the Jets. They should have assumed that they were getting a team that, like the Texans, made it to the Final 8 last year. I don't get it. And the more I have a chance to process it, Shireen, the more it stinks to me. And I already know, and look, I'm not going to throw Jack Easterby under the bus yet, but I know that there's some people in league circles that are already suggesting to me that Easterby saw an opportunity to manipulate McNair into getting rid of O'Brien and letting Easterby essentially run the show and hire a new coach. And what we see so far, common sense suggests that's exactly what's going on.
Yeah, because Jack Easterby is staying. There's no question about that. It's crazy that you change coaches in the middle of the season this early in a season because you're only 4 games in. And I realize this team is not going anywhere. And you know who is the happiest about this of anybody? Not just my family and friends down in Houston, but the Miami Dolphins are the happiest about this situation right now because they own the first and second round picks of the Houston Texans, and they're going to be high picks by all accounts. I get why they fired him. I don't get why now is the time to fire him. These mid-season coaching changes usually don't work out. Again, the Texans are a bad team. They were going to be a bad team, but why not wait till the end of the year to do this? You're not going anywhere this season. That much is obvious. You try to build and get what you can out of this year and start looking to 2021. And now they've made that move to start looking at 2021, but they have no idea who their head coach is. And you're not going to hire a head coach now. I mean, it gives you no advantage to fire him right now to go out and find a head coach. There are no head coaches available at this moment.
And Romeo Crennel, per multiple reports, and John McClain was the first one, your friend from the Houston Chronicle, he reported the news that O'Brien is out. Reported the news that Romeo Crennel will become the interim head coach. And also, and I don't know if John has put this in writing anywhere, but I texted John and asked, is Jack Easterby staying? That was my first question. Is this a cleaning of the house, or is this a handing of the keys to Easterby? And Easterby's staying. So, look, and again, I'm not here to pass along some of the strong opinions that people who have worked with Jack Easterby may have about him. This is a guy who has finagled his way with a great, what's the word I'm looking for? Line of, it's a four-letter word that starts with S and ends with T. I'm not going to say that word for obvious reasons. I don't want to join Billy O'Brien in looking for a new job. But the reputation that's out there, and see, here's what happens. Here's how, Shireen, let me peel back the curtain a little bit, break down the fourth wall. The people who are reporters and who rely upon access and information, and there's a symbiosis there, a lot of times they're reluctant to say what they're really hearing and to tell people what's really going on. The reality is there's suspicion that Jack Easterby is a guy who's an opportunist, a guy who has charmed Cal McNair, a guy who has essentially manipulated Cal McNair with this line of something that has convinced Cal McNair that Easterby knows what he's doing, and Easterby is the guy who should be entrusted to rebuild the franchise. And the idea that Easterby has already emerged from this implosion that has claimed Bill O'Brien after only 4 games, a year after they were in the round of 8, common sense points to Easterby being, number one, on the right side of this, and number two, presumably consulted before the decision was made. I doubt Cal McNair just fired Bill O'Brien without taking the temperature of Jack Easterby. And look, he's the winner. Congratulations, Jack. You win. You're the dog that caught the car. Now figure out what the hell you're going to do with it.
And that's the thing, Mike. What do you do with it? You don't have any picks. You don't have any money. And it goes back even further to when, before Bill O'Brien took over as GM, if you look at the Dwayne Brown trade to Seattle, they gave him away to Seattle for nothing, which precipitated them to go out and get Laramie Tunsil from the Dolphins. And they gave up way too much because they were desperate. And then they had to give up too much money for him because they had spent too much in draft capital to go get him. And then the DeAndre Hopkins trade, the best receiver in football. We're going to trade him away. And this receiver by committee approach is going to work great. And we think David Johnson is one of the best running backs in football, and he's going to cure our offense. No, it hasn't worked. None of that has worked. It's just been terrible. And so, you know, if you're a coach and you have opportunities to go elsewhere, when it comes down to it in the offseason or whenever they really start that coaching search, I'm going somewhere else. I'm not going to coach the Houston Texans for Jack Easterby for what they have talent-wise and the draft capital they have or don't have and the money that they don't have moving forward. This just, to me, looks like a team that's in decline for a really long time, not just this year, but for future years. This is a terrible football team.
With a franchise quarterback to whom they gave a contract that in total value, new money, is second only to Patrick Mahomes. And frankly, and we broke this all down at the time, the Deshaun Watson contract better for the player than the Mahomes contract for the Kansas City Chiefs. And that in and of itself, Shireen, makes the job attractive. Because usually what happens is when you have a vacancy, you don't have a quarterback. Job number one, how are we going to get a quarterback? What are we going to do for a quarterback? Now, there's also a risk here that as Jack Easterby identifies the candidates to take over in 2021, you need to find somebody who you can trust when they tell you, yes, we're all in with Deshaun Watson. And that needs to be the fundamental prerequisite for the job. An offensive-minded head coach who has a plan for maximizing Deshaun Watson. It can't be a wolf in sheep's clothing like Josh McDaniels when he became the Broncos head coach, and his first order of business was to get rid of Jay Cutler. See, once you sign the contract that guarantees you 4 or 5 years of pay, you have a lot of power. So part of the game is, if you really don't want Deshaun Watson, but you very much want to be an NFL head coach, saying what they want to hear. And then once you get the job, well, you know what? I was wrong about Deshaun Watson. Now that I have a chance to watch him practice, watch his decision-making, you know what? Maybe he's not the right guy for this team. And I don't believe any of that. I think he is the right guy for the team, but now you've introduced this new dynamic that there is a chance there's someone out there who gets that job that thinks he knows better, that thinks that Deshaun Watson isn't the answer. And part of the challenge as they screen candidates is to make sure they find somebody who can be believed when he says, yes, Deshaun is my guy, because that's now a wrinkle in all of this that needs to be on the radar screen as the Texans pick their next head coach. And I'll tell you what, you want to be sure that you're getting a guy that's all in with Deshaun Watson? You know who they need to hire, Shireen.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I know who they need to hire. You go to Clemson and you get to give that guy whatever he wants to come to Houston.
And let me tell you, I've never met Jack Easterby, but my guess is there are some personality similarities between Easterby and Dabo Swinney, and maybe that makes the town not big enough for both of them. But yeah, that's your guy. You want to get the most out of Deshaun Watson, you go hire Dabo. And you don't have to worry about a Trojan horse who's going to show up and tell you after one season, you know what, I think we're wrong about Deshaun Watson. We need somebody else at quarterback.
And I think that's exactly the right move for the Texans to make, to go get him. I mean, there's been no one who's been a bigger supporter of Deshaun Watson than Dabo, and he's his guy. And so that gives him a chance to work with Deshaun Watson again. It gives him a chance to do it in the NFL. We know he's losing his quarterback. Trevor Lawrence is, I'm sure, coming out after this season. So it would be a perfect opportunity for him to go coach the Texans and coach his former quarterback and see what he can do in the NFL. Can he duplicate his success in college in the NFL? It's only been done, we know, by a handful of guys, Jimmy Johnson being the premier example of that. But it would give him a chance to go see if he can do that. And I'm sure he thinks he can do that. So if I'm Jack Easterby, that would be my first phone call to make. And you can make that phone call now and just kind of put it out there that, hey, this is waiting for you at the end of the year if you're interested in it.
I just got a text from a general manager who will remain nameless because I must protect all my sources. Easterby got him. Man, you called it last year. I don't remember calling it last year, but I'll take credit for it. Total Brutus job. So, and again, and you know, and folks, I hope that this doesn't happen often, where something occurs literally minutes before the show starts and we have no opportunity to even think about what we're going to say, and we're just saying whatever comes into our brains. That's not the way that I want to operate, although, you know, a lot of times I operate that way just because of lack of preparation. But at least I want to have the chance to not prepare. I don't like not having the chance to not prepare. So this is all unvarnished reaction from Shireen and me as people who have followed the sport closely and understand the way that the sausage gets made, as to what may have happened, as to what probably happened, and as to what happens next. So interesting, to say the least, as to how this is going to play out for the Texans. And we can't rule out this dynamic. And this is one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of firing a coach in season and hiring an interim coach. You can have an artificial bump in the performance of the team because players who don't want to have to wonder what the new boss is going to do to them individually, the players step up because they want to help the interim head coach get the permanent head coaching job. And that rarely works, because if they step up, and it happened with Romeo Crennel in Kansas City after Todd Haley was fired back in 2012, I believe it was, the Chiefs stepped up, Romeo got the job, and then they went back to being the team that got the first coach fired. So that's always a mistake. And look, Romeo Crennel is a great and respected coach, but hopefully Jack Easterby and Cal McNair won't allow themselves to be influenced by the team going 6-6 over the final 12 games, and you still take advantage of the opportunity to hire the best person to be the coach. But again, Easterby's going to be the fly in the ointment, and Easterby may think, hey, you know what? If we give the job to Crennel, I'm in full power. I'm in control. Crennel's going to do whatever I want. I run the show. You bring in Dabo Swinney. Dabo may see through Jack, and Jack may be the one who gets thrown overboard next. So a lot of compelling dynamics that that are coming into play here, Shireen. And the Texans are now a very interesting team to watch the rest of the year, regardless of what they do when it's time to play games.
Yeah, no question. And my phone is lighting up right now. I grew up in the Houston area, and I've heard for weeks, if not months, that they needed to fire Bill O'Brien. So there's a lot of happiness in Houston right now, regardless of how this got done. I know the fans are excited that Bill O'Brien's gone. And it probably was time. 7 years hasn't gotten them to where they think they need to go, and whether they had the talent to beat Kansas City or not, the fact remains that they were way up on the Chiefs in the first half and blew it and lost big. And so they're excited Bill O'Brien's gone. We'll see what the future holds for the Texans. Only one team has ever come back from an 0-4 start to make the postseason, and that's the 92 Chargers. And we know the postseason.
Who was the coach? Who was the coach?
Expanded.
Who was the coach? Come on.
I don't know who was the coach.
Talking to college guys who went to the NFL. Bobby Ross. First year of Bobby Ross.
Bobby Ross.
Bobby Ross. 0-4. They came back and yep.
And made the playoffs.
And I don't look. You're right. With expanded playoffs, there's a chance. Nobody's ruled out, and maybe they will see an uptick. Who knows? Look, Bill O'Brien's a hell of a coach, but again, I still think he needed someone there to balance him out. And it was never going to be Easterby. And this all started, Shireen, when they had this great plan that they were going to fire Brian Gaine in June and they were going to hire Nick Caserio away from the Patriots. And it all fell apart when the Patriots called BS and said, no, we've got concerns about this. And they filed the tampering charge against the Texans. The Texans backed off. They went with no GM. And it was fine. See, that's the thing. Bill O'Brien in the dual role was validated by the decision to make him the GM after the season, making it to the final 8. Cal McNair was happy with what he saw. Well, behind the scenes, somebody was working on Cal McNair to come to a different conclusion, and that culminated in Bill O'Brien being fired today.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.